Hello, everyone. Hello, people. Welcome to Autism Career Pathways, and my name is Macy. I am the moderator and the person behind our nonprofit, Autism Career Pathways. So, welcome, everyone. I'm super excited to chat with Lyric today. I wanted to chat with you, Lyric, about your book, Workplace Neurodiversity Rising. So people, if you have not gotten this book, yes, thank you for reading your book because I only have a Kindle version. Yeah, so tell us about the idea. Like, how did you get this idea about this book?
Well, honestly, it came from like the realization that just if you look at neurodiversity as an entire spectrum from all the different neurotypes out there, and then look at even like mental health differences and all of that people experience that come to workplace with us, it's a really big problem that so many of us are underappreciated in the workplace, underemployed, unemployed, out of work, are unable to get just the basic accommodations that we need in order to do jobs that if we were accommodated, we could do really, really well. But a lot of us are in jobs that are far below our skill levels because people aren't willing to accommodate us or meet us where we are. And it's such a big project. And especially, when I started working on this book, I was working to develop what organizations needed to do to change, and I was working with organizations as a consultant in another organization, and now I'm working on my own. Since COVID, I kind of branched out on my own, but the realization was like, I definitely can't do all of the work, and I don't want to do all of the work that needs to be done. And so I wanted to make it almost like putting what I do into like a handbook or a package that it's like, here, you go do the work yourself. Like here's this thing, you take this and go start making changes, and you don't need me, hopefully. Like, because I don't want to work 70, 60, 50, 40 hours a week. I did that all through my young life. Like I was in corporate for long enough that I only take on a couple clients a month now. And and that's it. But there are a lot more people than that need to change the workplaces. And if you just take this, in one workplace that has 100 employees, whether or not 100 of them are neurodivergent, there's going to be neurodivergent employees in that group, hopefully, unless they're really exclusive. And if there's not, that's a bigger problem. But this is going to make things better for everyone in your workforce. It's not just your neurodivergent employees. It's like when you fix things for, the groups that need more help, it actually is going to make it better for everyone. So, these things with your fixing the organizational culture so that it's more inclusive for neurodivergent people, it's going to benefit the workplace as a whole to treat everyone like a human instead of an exploitable resource.
Yeah. So for our audience here who have not read Lyric's book, for me, the brilliance of this book, number one, I think you wrote it in a way that anyone reading it, even people who don't know anything about neurodivergence or autism, they could understand it. So I really appreciate that because I work with people from different parts of the world, and they don't speak English. So I always worry how our neurodiversity affirming work as a professional working with autistic individuals can translate to my birth country, because some words I don't know how to say in my own language because I learned it in English, So I think you wrote this book in a language that it doesn't really matter what cultural background or whether you're English speaking or not, you can really understand it. But tell us about the outline or how you structure this book.
Yeah.
So there's something unique about it.
Yeah, well, I tried to make it easily digestible because, I think we have ADHDers, especially being an ADHDer myself. It's sometimes, or even just someone who is demand avoidant or anxious about starting something new, because like a new project can feel really overwhelming because it's like, oh my gosh, there's all of these things I have to do. This is really overwhelming. But, you know, this manual is broken down. So it's like, you know, you can look at the index and pick a section, like if something's calling to you and jump in it. But also, it's also divided up in the organizational culture piece, and then also the more concrete, you know, things talking about policies and procedures and benefits. And so all of it's broken out so that you can easily index and look at the part that has concern in your organization. And that's because it's intended to be used, you know, with feedback from the members of your team to talk about what their concerns are. Because no organization is going to be the same. Like, some organizations may only need to work on 1 or 2 things in this book, and some may need to do all of it. You know, that's the spectrum of organizations that we're looking at. And so, you know, when you start to talk to people in your organization and find out what's important to them, what they feel is lacking, that's how you're going to know what you need to work on. And so, you know, you can go through here and do what is applicable, what you feel is most urgent, or if you're kind of feeling overwhelmed, just pick something and do it. Because if you just make one thing better, you're at least making it better. And then it's like, okay, now you can do the next thing. And you can chisel away at it and start making it better. Because the most important thing for people to do is start. And so I wanted to make it really easy for people to at least start and get some momentum going.
Yes, absolutely. So your book is like a draft or a template for any business owners, for anybody really in the position to guide someone neurodivergent, or have the opportunity to work with other people. If you're a coworker, you know, chances are there are neurodivergent people working next to you, and that person is still hiding their neurodivergent identity.
If they know about it.
Book, we're all hiding because so this book, you can start in the middle, you can start, you know, towards the back, you can mix and match. There's, for each section, there are also guiding questions for you to keep in mind, or to be able to modify using lyrics questions according to your own work business culture. So that's really great. I love those lists of questions at the end of each chapter. To me, that's so awesome. It's like a summary because my mind tends to be very cluttered, so I don't really understand a lot of written words, but you wrote it in a way that my mind can digest all the information. So that's really awesome.
Time is, it was originally intended to be more like a workbook. But Amazon Publishing hates workbooks or anything that's intended to be written in for some reason. So we had to make it a little bit less like a workbook. But really, if you can use it like a workbook, and you're just doing the writing on your own paper instead of writing in the book. But I like to write all in the margins. Like, I've been writing all in this book, like that I've got now, like my own book. I'm writing all in it. Like, and I think people should be able to write all in their books, and because that's how I learned. So that was the original intent, but Amazon hated it. So I love it. It still works.
Yeah, it's great. So I have the next question. So you have worked in a corporate setting, you've worked in a family business, all these different settings, which is typical to an autistic person. We kind of, I call it dump and shift, like over and over again. And then there is a reason about that. So in your book, you talk a lot about emotional safety, which I really love. So how does one know when they are amongst allies, amongst people who actually want to learn more, people who are accountable? But that's, I feel like that kind of, it's not given when you're starting work at it. So talk about that phrase, emotional safety. What does that mean? How do you know if you have it?
So, you know, emotional safety is where people feel safe to bring their full self, you know, into a space, a workplace, a room, a group of people. You know, you don't feel like you have to leave parts of yourself behind, and you're not feeling like you have to constantly like adapt and make yourself acceptable to the people around you. You feel you can just exist and you just be, and just being as you are, and you feel safe doing so. And when you're neurodivergent, or if you're multiply marginalized, you know, you're trans, or, you know, you have other things going on, that there's even more things that can make you feel like you don't have emotional safety. So, like, really creating emotional safety so that people can bring their whole selves even to the workplace is so incredibly important. But for a long time, we had a lot of workplaces that were all like, oh, you know, leave your problems at your door, and we don't, you know, you're at work now, we don't want to think about what's going on at home. And I think that's what's been it doesn't work for neurodivergent people or people who need to ask for help, you know, because it becomes really taboo to like have a problem almost, because you're like acting like everything is fine. Okay, it's like the toxic positivity culture that comes with that. And so, like, before COVID, that was a very prevalent thing. But then when people started working from home and they were like parenting their kids while they're and doing teaching, you know, while they were working, or the kids were popping in on Zoom, or people's dogs and cats were popping their little feet and faces and things into the camera, you know, like, we had to see like a more human aspect, and there was no leave your home at home and leave your work, you know, and separate them. Like, we had to see that like there's a full human picture, which is, I think, why the neurodiversity thing has really started to boom ever since then, because it's like finally we're letting people be human in the workplace, and we have to be able to bring our full selves.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important.
Yeah. So I think you're saying that if there is a true inclusivity culture, there is that emotional safety where even if you're a new employee, you get that vibe of, okay, I can be myself and I can ask for help, and people, my coworkers, will not see it as me making things up or being dramatic, or that I'm just weak or lazy, right?
Yeah, everyone has, you know, everyone feels like they can speak up and say, this is my need, and they know they're not going to be shamed for it. They can be themselves. They don't have to hide, and they feel safe. Like, they feel safe doing so. They're not worried about repercussions. Like, you know, you know, you're not second guessing. Like, if I ask for help, am I going to be looked down upon for it? Like, there's none of that second guessing. Like, is it safe to be myself? Is it safe to ask for what I need?
Yeah. So that's really important. So earlier in your book, in one of the, I think very early in the chapters, you talk about the importance of having feedback loop. You know, and I thought to myself, you know, every classroom, it doesn't matter what grade, needs to have this culture of open communication, and there's a feedback loop. Same as if you go into restaurants, sometimes you have that feedback box, customer feedback box. So talk about that, because I think this is important.
Well, any relationship, really, whether it's a work relationship, it's a professional relationship, or a personal relationship, or, you know, if you're building a relationship with your students, or anyone, you know, you have to have that open line of communication. And a big part of that in workplaces or in any space, you know, that emotional safety, you know, why it's so big in the book is because it's like a first step to having open communication, because you have to have trust, right? And also, to have really open, honest, vulnerable communication, you have to have emotional safety, because if you don't feel safe and you don't feel like you trust the people you're speaking to, you're not going to feel like, you know, maybe like if you have something that is sensitive information to you, you're not going to feel safe divulging or sharing that information. So like all of these, like these different layers kind of are like a pyramid that like build on one another to create like safety for people to actually access what they need to be the best versions of themselves.
Yes, absolutely. So my next question is about like influencing change for neurodivergent people who are lucky enough to be employed. But if you're still under the radar and not feeling safe to disclose and be your true authentic self, but you have a job, how can you influence inclusivity culture at work?
Yeah. So, you know, that's the hard thing, because sometimes if you are not out yet in the workplace and you don't feel like it's safe for you to be out in the workplace, that might be a good time to look
Tricky,
at your
huh?
spidey sense, because it might actually not be safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, somebody has to be brave enough to take the first leap and go
Right.
first. So it's like, who can take that risk? Or, you know, does your organization have, you know, when I do work with organizations, I do an anonymous organizational survey so people can do anonymous feedback,
Right.
just in case people don't have emotional safety to speak up about things, and people can share things they wouldn't feel safe sharing, you know, if they don't feel safe. And so, you know, is there an anonymous way people can submit feedback? So, because they could say, hey, you know, we need to start having these conversations. Maybe you could plant those seeds, and maybe they can bring someone in, or maybe they can start the conversations in the company. Maybe there are other neurodivergent people in the company who are willing to have those conversations, who feel safer, or, you know, maybe after, you know, a while, you'll feel safe
Yeah.
enough, and maybe that'll be you. You know, it might be you, but like, don't also like, because I know that the companies that are actually really truly inclusive right now are a dime a dozen, and they're in the minority. Like they are out there. They exist. I've seen them. I've worked with them. And it makes me happy. But then I go and I realize, like, they're like, you know, a few in 100. So, you know, make sure you're staying safe, you know, just in case you're not in a company that is going to be accepting.
Yeah. So if you are in that particular situation where you're still walking on thin ice, maybe making a suggestion to actually hire autistic people or neurodivergent people just for the month of April.
or send your manager my book.
Yes,
you know,
or buy
and tell them to
book.
start reading the book, you know. Send it to your HR person, HR and managers, you know, the people who are like the custodians of people within the organization would be the people. And if there's someone in leadership you actually feel safe talking to, you know, go to a safe person if you feel safe with someone.
Yeah. So find a safe person. And if you are working at a company who truly want to know more, like they're open to learning, they want to have conversations about how do we take better care of our neurodivergent employees. Let's start with our own people first. And I love that. If I get a request to help like a company tweak and help their inclusivity culture to be better, I love that more so than hiring. Because what's the purpose of hiring neurodivergent people if they're just surviving every day, right?
Yeah, hiring is definitely not the first step I recommend either. Like, that's kind of like, you need to look at what's going on now before you start worrying about bringing in new people. And if they want to just do hiring and they're not looking at anything else, honestly, like, that's a red flag for me, that they're wanting this just for lip service. And see, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot. I'd be like, you need to find someone else.
Right. So if a company is truly inclusive and not just during the month of April, that's like a dream come true for Lyric and many of us, you know. So then how can you continue to push the edge, you know, from just having conversations, but then maybe being more innovative and being a better role model for other similar companies? How does that look, or some ideas for that?
Yeah. Well, you know, the thing is, like, a lot of organizations that are doing really well have done a few things. A lot of them have like employee resource groups for neurodivergent or neurodiversity groups where the neurodivergent employees can meet. And then, you know, if they have things that, you know, for example, you know, a policy or something is bothering them, or they have events to raise more understanding. And so, like, they'll put on events and they'll share with the company to build more understanding. And so, like, when you're building it within your own company, you know, first, that lets you, then if you have another companies you work with, you know, maybe it's your distributors or your clients, and you can show them, hey, look, like, we're inclusive and this is how we're inclusive. And you can spread that by being a role model, leading by example. You know, and that's so incredibly important, because, you know, the more organizations that do this, like, you know, if we're looking to go through government models,
Yeah.
like government moves slow, right? But organizations have the power to write their own policies right now. The only person they're waiting on is like whoever's at the top to say, okay, we can do it, right? And they just have to get a
Yeah.
yes and they can change it. So like we can be ahead of the game in workplaces if
Sure.
we are willing to stop saying, oh, this is just the way we've always done it, and let's just listen to people and say, what do we need to do to really help everyone be the best version of themselves?
Those are really great ideas to level things up. If you happen to be in one of those well, maybe not 1, 2 out of 10 companies who are really truly inclusive. So Lyric was saying, really engage with your DDIB people to really keep innovating and sharing with other companies. That would be really good. Networking, right? Company to company.
And you need to let your neurodivergent people lead these initiatives. Like the ones that are doing really bad are the ones where it's like the organizational like neurodiversity groups are led by people who are not even neurodivergent. Like that doesn't work. It doesn't.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot of reasons for that, but you know that could be a whole separate episode.
Yeah. So this next question that I prepared for you, I think it came from, I work with many autistic people needing higher level of support, and people who have much different communication preferences other than mouth words. Many of them can do much more than I could ever do as a speaking autistic, right? So is it possible to have a minimally speaking or unreliably speaking neurodivergent person to work at a medium to large size company?
Oh, absolutely. And I've met non-speakers who are working in medium, large, and then huge, like, you know, what are the mega companies? Like, so, but the thing that's important is that that company has to actually be putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak, and be inclusive. Like they have to really like meet that person where they are with their communication and empower them and make sure it's not used against them and they're not stigmatized for it, and that they actually are, they make the effort to be included. You know, that includes like maybe changing the way meetings are run, sometimes changing like sometimes, like, you know, if you look at job descriptions, for example, they'll be like excellent written and spoken communication, but it's like they don't really actually need both of those things to do the job when you really look at it. So it's like sometimes it's like evaluating all of your job descriptions across the board to see if they're asking for things that are really not even technically necessary for the work the person's going to be doing.
Right.
Because the most important thing for anyone, like regardless of ability, is that their skills are well suited to the job they're doing, and they're doing a job that also they enjoy doing, and it's not draining to them. Like they like doing the work, and it is fulfilling work that they're going to come to work wanting to do, and they're going to feel fulfilled by the work. And everybody's going to enjoy different work tasks, right? Like people say like success, it's like, well, what is your definition of success? Because for me, it's like, am I going to do a job that I'm happy doing, and it's going to fill my cup, instead of a job that at the end of the day I'm going to go home and like need to recover from it for 9 hours because I feel worn down and I hate my work, and I'm just doing it because, you know, it's my job.
So hire the best person for the job, basically, right? And if that person has a much different communication preferences, then, you know, still reserve the seat for that person, but do your best to be able to understand each other. That's basically what you're saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, any person, we should be in the habit of any person in the workplace, like realize we all communicate differently. And so it's like, we should take that into consideration. For example, like some people are more direct, some people, you know, a little bit more less direct. Some people really struggle to process spoken speech, and some people like do really well with getting things in writing. So it's like, even if they can speak well, some people might be like, hey, I do so much better if you can just send me that in writing, or put this in an email instead of like telling me out loud. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, that's fine. Like, let's meet everybody in the middle so that we can all, like, not do so much of the stretching. Because, right now, unfortunately, a lot of neurodivergent people are doing so much of the stretching and communication. And you can only stretch so much before, you start to wear down from all of the stretching.
Yes. Okay, so I only have one last question for you, but I'm scrolling to see if there are questions or comments. So people, you can write your questions. If you have any, you can write them now. So I'm reading, I'm David, inspired by Steven Universe's Rebecca Sugar, have a question. I know Pearl and Peridot are autistic too, just like us, including me and us. Did you know it? Okay, so that's...
I haven't seen Steven Universe, so I didn't know, but I know it's a really popular show, and I've heard it has really good just representation in general. And so I've heard really good things about it, but I haven't seen it.
Okay, so I don't think there are any other questions. No questions. That means we did a good job rambling. So my last question is this one. What do you want your readers to take away? What will be the main keep in mind that readers of your new book you would like to have?
I hope the main takeaway is that, we are, like, a lot of the things we need to do to make the world as a whole, not just workplaces, because this is applicable to any kind of a space, public space, any space, but the things that we need to do to make the world inclusive are simple. They're not expensive a lot of the times. They require us to trust people around us. So trust, not too expensive, right? They require trust is like the big thing, and like listening to people and empathy. Like, those are the kind of big needs that we have here in this book, is to have empathy and trust, and assume people have good intentions, and listen to people,
right.
And let people tell you what they need to be the best version of themselves, instead of us putting our assumptions on other people based on our own knowledge of how, like, we experience the world. Because every single person in this world, whether even like two autistic people, like, have two very different experiences of the world. And so like, we can't imagine how another person experiences the world. We can only hope to understand when the other person shares with us. And so I hope that people really take that away, as like, we can try to understand what another person is going through, but really, because of all these differences in the way our brains process information and emotions and all these different things, it's really impossible to know. So we just need to listen a lot more.
Yeah. So I just want to share this with you to end our chat. You and I have connected before my formal diagnosis. And I just wanted to thank you for being such a good role model. It's what you do is not easy. And today I posted on Twitter, I said that, today, as a late diagnosed autistic person, I'm able to see and appreciate my strength. But I wouldn't have been able to do that. I wouldn't be able to see that without, like, people like you, just like being openly sharing, so I just wanted to thank you.
Well, you're one of those role models too now, Maisie. So thank you, because, all of us who come and, like, be visible, like, so now you're doing the same thing. So I want to thank you also, because, just being visible, we need as much autistic visibility, I think, as possible. And I think people didn't understand late diagnosed folks until fairly recently too. So I think that's an important thing that people need to understand. And then us, like, I'm in my 30s. at my late 30s, technically now. We'll say mid 30s, right? We'll say mid 30s for as long as I can get away with it. But like, you know, and talking about like how autistic people grow up, because for so long it was like, oh, they disappear at 18. It's like, no, we don't. And some of us are growing and aging and all these things. And so we need to have these conversations.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for your work, and thank you, our audience, and for people who will be listening to the recording. Thank you for being here, and get the book. That's my drop your mic. Get the book.
Thank you, Rachel.
There you go.
It's so wonderful to see you. Yeah. Bye.